Hey there, Chris Bassett here, and I'm doing a valve cover replacement for a 2007 Pontiac G5. This will also work for years 2005 to 2010, G5, G6, and the Chevy Cobalt. Let's get into it. So let's start by removing the dust cover, that way you can get access to the top of the engine. If you need to, you can pull off the air intake. There's a clamp right there. You can undo the clamp. There's also the hose that runs to the oil, and then there's also a clamp underneath that requires a standard screwdriver. You can just pop all that stuff off. It'll allow a little bit more working room so you're not cramped. All right, let's go ahead and take off the oil cap. That way the dust cover pop off. If you need to, mine was already loose, but there's some tabs in the back. You may need to kind of pry on it to pop it off, but then you have access to the top of the engine. Make sure you replace the oil cap. That way nothing falls down in there. Don't need no dust or bugs or tools falling in there. And then while looking straight ahead on the engine, underneath, here is that hose clamp. You can see this screw right there. That'll loosen up the hose clamp, and then you can take the air intake off. And then back over here on the left side, there's an oil hose. Just go ahead and throw some pliers on that clamp, pinch it, and then you can slide it back. And then that whole air intake will pop off. So here I'm demonstrating, just got some pliers. Just gonna slide that clamp back, and then we'll go over to the right side, and I'll just have a standard screwdriver, and just gonna untwist that, loosen it up. You don't have to totally remove it. Just back it out, I don't know, 3 or 4 revolutions, loosen it up, and then that whole air intake should just come off. It is nice to have plenty of room to work with. One thing to keep in mind is, be very gentle with the wiring when on the next part. You don't want to break any of the wiring for the ignition system, because then it's going to give you extra problems. But we're going to want to remove these 4 coils. So these are all connected to the spark plugs underneath, so you'll need to pull these all off. They have a couple of clips in the back. You can use a standard screwdriver and gently wiggle the sides of the clips, and then depress the center. There's like a tooth in the center, and you depress that, and that'll allow that plastic clip to slide out. Save those clips somewhere safe. We'll reuse them when we reassemble everything. And then the plug itself, if you look down inside, it's held on by a little clip. So very gently wiggle the screwdriver in between the clip, and you'll feel the plug loosen. It just snaps in place, and then you can remove the plug. So go ahead and repeat the process for all 4 plugs, and then you'll remove the 10mm bolt here. So get yourself a ratchet and a socket and pull those 4 bolts off. All 4 bolts should be pretty easy to remove. I think they're only held on by like 10 foot-pounds or something, but then save those bolts and we'll reinstall them later. With the plug and the bolt out, you can now pull out the coil or the boot. It'll go and it'll pop right out, and then you can label these if you want. You don't need to, but you can label them 1, 2, 3, 4, and then save those off to the side. There's your spark plug in there if you're curious. This would also be a good opportunity to replace the spark plugs if you haven't. I've got a video on the channel showing how to do so, so just search that up if you're interested. All right, so in this next clip, I've got all the plugs removed, and the spark plug coils are all pulled out, and now it's time to remove the bolts that are holding the cover down. There are 11 bolts, if I remember correctly, but just go ahead, and they are also 10mm, so you can use your socket ratchet and then take off those 11 bolts. You'll probably want to remove that plug that's right there. That way, the wiring will pull off easier. The wiring's all clipped in around the cover, so just use some pliers and pop those plastic clips out. That way it'll give you some room to work the cover back off the side here. All right, so in the next clip, showing you I removed the sensor, that plug right there, just give you a little more room to work with. And then we're starting to take the bolts out. Just pointing out all the bolts. Once they get so loose, pull them out with your pliers. They're wedged in there with a rubber grommet. Also, you could just remove the cover completely, but you want to fold the wire back up out of the way. Here is I think this is a fuel hose. It's clipped in, so just insert your flathead screwdriver in there, pry out on the clip, and then move that black clip up the hose, and those are connected to the cover that you'll need to take off, so you have to remove those clips. Once you're sure everything is loose, you can grab a hold of the cover, and it should just pull off. You may need to wedge a screwdriver or something underneath that to kind of break it free. It could be stuck on there depending how old it is. But before we completely remove it, we'll pull all the wiring out of the way, and then we'll just wiggle it out to the side here. All right, now that the cover's off, the top of the valve is exposed, so you want to clean that up. It looks pretty gross. You'll scrape off any excess gasket or junk, and then you also want to keep everything covered while you're working. You don't want anything falling down in here, but you can see along the edge where it's cleaner. Clean that up. You can use a razor blade, a cloth, around the actual spark plugs. There's wherever the gasket was sitting, clean that up and get ready for the new gasket. You can see there's the old gasket. It's black, and it goes around the 4 spark plugs, and then it goes around the top of the cover. I will have links in the description for the gaskets I used, but also double check and look, once you pull your gasket off, you can look at it, and then I order off Amazon. Compare the image of the gasket on the ground versus the image in the Amazon picture, because it said you're not allowed to return it once it's opened. But once again, clean up the surface as best you can. That way the new gasket can seal properly. Here I took the valve cover outside. You can see the old gasket. You can use something to pry it up with. I'm using a razor blade. You can also use like a little pair of pliers. But you'll want to gently pull it up and off of the valve cover, and then we'll be replacing once the new one ships. You can use a scraper or a plastic putty knife to clean off any old gasket material, and then you want to clean up the oil residue. I like to use brake clean, help clean that up, but then paper towels and clean up everything, make it as easy as possible for the new gasket to seat properly. Here I'm going to hose down the inside with some cleaner, let it sit for a while, and then wipe it out. The new gasket came in, so let's go ahead and take a look at it. Make sure everything fits, and it looks like it's good to go. We will be replacing these grommets on the bolts. They're a one-time use, so make sure you swap those out. You can cut them off or you can pull them off, but there's some new grommets that go with it. And then we're just going to lay out the gasket, make sure everything looks good. Some gaskets may require a thin bead of RTV sealant in specific spots. You want to check your gasket's instructions. I didn't use any sealant, but if you need to, apply a small amount and let it sit for a couple minutes. So here's the grommets. I can just pop it off by hand. If they're pretty difficult to move, I let the rubber sit in the sun, and once the rubber was warm, it was much more pliable, easy to handle. Also, in the 10mm bolts for the spark plugs, pull those out and replace those grommets as well. If you don't opt to replace any of the grommets, could cause an issue when you go to torque down the bolts. It'll give false torque readings. I actually broke a bolt because I couldn't tell what my torque wrench was reading. So here I got the gasket pressed into place. I'm going to set the cover on top, line up all the bolts, and then the specs you're looking for is if you have foot-pounds, the bolts are between 8 to 10 foot-pounds. If you're using inch-pounds, it's 89 inch-pounds. So on my torque wrench, it's hard to read, but it has that center slot. So we'll turn it all the way to 0, and then if you go up by every 5, it goes in increments of 5. It counts in 5, 10, 15, 20, and then each little dash is in between that. So here we're setting it to 10. There's 10. So now I got 10 foot-pounds, and I'm going to torque all the bolts down. I'll turn up the volume. You can hear the clicking when the torque wrench hits 10 pounds. As I was saying earlier, I actually broke a bolt, so be very, very careful. It's aluminum. 10 foot-pounds is hardly anything if you're used to cranking on bolts, so be careful. I did find an option where you can pull that stopper off. I used a punch to punch it out, and then I just went to the local hardware store and picked up a bolt. But it's a hardened bolt, it's not aluminum, so I got to be extra careful not to tighten it down too much. I just picked up some bolts. They had the thread matcher, so you can use the threads, and then you slide that over and put your grommet on, and it looks about the same as the other one. It's still 10mm, same length, same thread count, so I think we're good to go. With your gasket installed properly, all the grommets sealed, we've reinstalled the bolts. You want to torque all the bolts down to between 8 to 10 foot-pounds. I definitely reinstall the bolts by hand first to avoid cross-threading, and then you'll tighten them in a crisscross pattern to ensure even pressure. You can then go ahead and put back the 4 coils. Those 4 bolts that connect the coils, you can plug in all your plugs, reconnect your PVC hose and your air intake tube, and get everything put back together. You can then start the engine, let it idle for a few minutes. Make sure you check for any oil leaks around the valve cover. If everything looks good, you're all set. If you see leaks, double check your bolts and gasket seating, and then a quick test drive can also confirm everything's running smoothly. Hey, check out some other videos over here. I've got Amazon links for everything I've used, part numbers and everything down in the description, so check that out if you want to help support it at no extra cost. Any other questions or comments, put those below. Thanks.